This is the Leadership in Insurance podcast, brought to you by FinPro Search Partners.
Insurance companies are businesses and they need to look for the long term and be sustainable.
We went from 0 to 1 and now it's going from 1 to 100.
Insurance as a concept, as a kind of service, is brilliant. The execution is what we're looking at now.
I think the companies that are going to succeed are the ones that are going to understand and master the art of intent.
When we talk about innovation, we lean too heavily to think about technology, and we don't think about creating a culture of innovation.
I think innovation is essentially continuous improvement of existing processes and platforms and product.
Right? It's got to be easy. It's got to be seamless. Good morning and welcome to the Leadership Insurance Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Bond, and I'm very lucky today to be joined by Garrett, who is SVP, Director of Innovation and Digital Risk Practice Leader at IMA. How are you, sir? I nearly ran out of steam there. There was so much of it, but we'll
it's a mouthful, isn't it?
It is. It's a hell of a thing. One of those jobs on its own is quite a big deal. So yeah,
I
many
agree.
jobs together. Well, look, Garrett, thank you for joining me. Pleasure to have you on board. Where am I speaking to you from? You're obviously stateside, but whereabouts are you based?
I am East Coast, just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina.
Lovely stuff. Lovely stuff. Well, look, you and I have obviously met before, but it's always good to start with, who are you and who are IMA as well, because yeah, we've got this international audience, so not as many people will know, but pretty big, sizable business and some interesting stuff to do there.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me, Alex. Again, my name is Garrett Droege. As you said, I'm head of innovation, head of digital risk for IMA Financial. I've been in insurance for about 20 years, pretty much exclusively on the brokerage side. As far as IMA is concerned, we're one of the largest privately held retail independent brokers in the U.S., around a billion in turnover or revenue, offices coast to coast. So while I sit in Charlotte, very often in New York or Colorado or California.
Nice, brilliant stuff. So walk us through these roles. You've got these multiple titles. What do they mean to you internally?
So innovation, IMA has in its core mission to be hyper-focused on becoming the brokerage of the future. And for us, one of those pillars is through modern tech architecture. So that's things like InsurTech and innovation, also through investment. So I help manage that's a business unit called IMA Labs. It's focused on all three of those areas. We co-own and operate an InsurTech accelerator called BrokerTech Ventures. Through that, we do a lot of mentoring of early stage InsurTech startups. Of those, we implement probably 6 to 10 a year in POCs, and then move the successful ones on to contract internally, enterprise wide. And then occasionally we also have a CVC, and we do direct investments in some of those funds, some of those firms. We're also an LP in a few other venture funds that we're constantly asked to evaluate new technology and figure out if the value proposition fits the brokerage use case. So that's one half. The other half would be digital risk, which is our focus on emerging technology from a risk standpoint. So that's mostly digital asset, blockchain, fintech, AI, sort of that emerging technology space that has a very complex risk profile. That's where I've spent the entirety of my career. By background, I was a startup founder, freelance software developer, taught myself how to code, built a company, sold it, kind of randomly got into insurance, but started focusing on insuring tech companies 20 years ago. And I've done that ever since. So we're very much focused on kind of the future economy, which we believe is fully tech enabled. And that's what digital risk is focused on ensuring.
Amazing. It's such a broad role. I think it must be such an interesting role. And for someone to me that's diagnosed with OCD and ADHD, it's like the dream. If there's lots of things I can get deep into, but there's lots of different things I can put my attention to.
Same.
So.
Yeah, yeah. No, it works very well for my brain as well.
Yeah. Great stuff. What I think was fascinating when I first started talking to you about that breadth was that, yeah, I think outside looking in, you could say there's too much there. But then the other thing is that, we started having this conversation about, do you think it's important that you've got all these broad points of contact to deliver innovation? Because we were sort of talking about effective innovation. I suppose that's what I mean. All of those touch points are what drive innovation, and I would probably see that as being necessary. But is that why it's so broad, that effective innovation piece?
Yeah, look, I think to be successful in working with tech companies, you
Mm,
have to have muscle in their ecosystem. And what that
mm,
looks like is understanding what capital raises look like, how technology companies are structured. Um, we need to have our hands in that sandbox in order for us to keep our finger on the pulse of what these companies are trying to build and how to properly insure those risks. Because in a lot of ways, the risks of insuring a digital asset company are still largely unknown to most people. Most underwriters don't feel confident to evaluate that risk, and so they don't even have products to serve that class. So I think to your point, it does sound like too much, and some days it is too much. But it's a bit like training for a marathon. Like you can't just
mm,
run. You also need to spend some time in the gym working on the other muscle groups, right? And that
mm.
actually in turn helps your marathon pace. And so I think of it the same way. Both sides serve the other in interesting ways. And I'll tell you an area where they came together and still have come together. We launched an internal project called Web3 Labs, where we're big believers in Web3 technology. That's things like digital assets and blockchain, and really wanted to apply it in the insurance space. And so we looked for opportunities to say, all right, what's trending now in Web3? And 3 years ago, that was the metaverse. And so we said, all right, great. Let's stand up an R&D facility in the metaverse to test out different risk theories. What can happen with virtual property? Could it be vandalized? Can you insure it that way? What happens if your virtual land is stolen from you? Is that recoverable? Building insurance products for a specific use case in Web3. We did the same thing with NFTs when NFTs were popular. We've done the same sort of project with augmented and mixed reality. So those two worlds come together quite frequently for us because we think emerging technology risk it requires innovation.
Yeah, no, completely. And what it was reminding me of when you were speaking was one that kind of, yeah, having skin in the game. I think it's really important. And I think your profile's really interesting, having that kind of startup founder and tech and knowing insurance. I mean, it's quite unique. Be a hell of a job if someone gave it to me and I had to try and replace you in the business. That'd be quite a challenge actually. I'm pretty good at my job. I was sitting there scratching my head going, I don't know that many people. There's one or two that have got all of those. But what it made me think about was the debate about things like build versus buy. And I think, you know, I think it's great to build things now, and it's always full circle. Sometimes it's all buy, sometimes it's all build, and it's a sort of almost like a trend thing. But it's having enough bandwidth within the idea of innovation to say we probably need to build some stuff that's bespoke to us, and it might give it a key advantage. But you need enough of a kind of eye on the horizon to know what good looks like in the current environment. And then you have to have enough knowledge and sensibility that if, let's say, there's a point solution that comes in that plugs into that, but actually it's cost effective to buy it because it's great the bandwidth to also buy that as well. And I feel like many businesses trying to approach innovation in this kind of very monoline structure. Because to tell another kind of broader story, we were asked to build out a sort of AI underwriting team for a company. And now they could have bought this, and our suggestion was, have you explored that? But they wanted to do it in house. And then we put this team in, and I know the team quite well. And then they were talking to all these different parts of the business, and all the elements that they needed, all different teams had already started building them, but no one had kind of talked to each other. So, yeah, it shows you how
Yeah.
that kind of central pull through. How many times do you start to look at things and then you actually find out the business is already kind of off on its own projects, or have you tried to
I think
prevent
that
it
happens
now?
a lot. And,
Yeah,
I think communication solves the world's problems, right? Like we
yeah,
need just in general, full stop.
yeah.
That happens at small companies and it certainly happens at larger companies. We're roughly 3,000 associates. So
Mhm.
obviously we start projects all the time and realize, oh, we've been working on this for 6, 12 months and had no idea. So again, having good communication central to success there. But I don't think it's a bad thing. So you mentioned AI. We have a number of working groups that are building out their own AI use cases, sort of in their own silos, and we let them build them out. I don't want to say let them. We're not trying to centralize them because I think there's real value in different teams with different perspectives working on a similar solution. Now, at some point, you have to bring them all together and say, okay, who's ahead and who's willing to let go of their project and follow the project that's clearly better. But you can get vastly different results from different teams that are working on the same project. So I think in some ways that's good to have that sort of internal challenger mindset. But yeah, it's a huge problem. Build versus buy. My knee jerk on that is if it touches our customers, I feel like there's a stronger argument to build it, right? Because as a company, you need things that are proprietary to your company that are only available from your company so that clients feel, oh, this is unique. We have something, we go to this firm for this exclusive product, service, team, whatever it is, platform. Internal tools, I feel like there's we need to think long and hard about whether we're really in it for the long game because it's all fine and good to build something. You have to maintain that with
Mm.
every other piece of technology that you are bringing on board, integrating with. It becomes very complex if you're trying to maintain a homegrown piece of technology, and that's not your core business, right? So if at the end of the day, we're a retail insurance brokerage, that should be our focus, not building out different tech startups from within. Now we've done that. We've built companies internally and spun them out realizing there's actually something here that other brokers would probably appreciate and want to partner on, and they should go through their own venture raise and be on their own financial journey outside of our four walls. That's just my take. I won't say that's a corporate stance. That's just how I usually think of build versus buy.
Mm. Yeah, it's similar actually. I was having a conversation with the head of innovation from Aventum, and they do a lot of their own building, and that really was about where it's a potential like customer facing, client facing USP. That makes sense because, like you say, proprietary is important. I wanted to talk to you with your many hats on, but I think particularly important is that you've been a founder and how you think about POCs. Interesting to me that you had very defined rules and deliverables on POCs. And I kind of wanted to know, and I think this is such a grey area. It's the point of conflict for startups and kind of big incumbents. So, what are these defined rules and why? I suppose is probably a good follow up.
I am not a fan of POCs that are drug out and spread very thin. I like highly targeted short POCs. So
Hmm.
45, 60 days max. If we can do it in 30, even better.
Hmm.
Um, to do that well, you have to have a framework in the beginning with what are my KPIs for this particular solution? Who's going to own it? How are we going to report back to determine did we meet these KPIs or not? And sometimes that's the hardest part is kind of the pre-POC, making sure you have the right team. because I won't say I get this right 100% of the time.
Hmm.
We've done POCs where 2, 3 weeks into it, you realize I'm not sure the team that we have selected for this piece of technology is the right team to evaluate it fully. And the team basically says, meh, it's fine. It doesn't really add enough value, so we're okay living without it. We could have gotten a different result if we had a different team. And so sometimes there's a risk there if you're not doing your homework on the front end. The POC could just fail. But similarly, if you try and do a 12-month POC, and I know as a founder, startups need that revenue. They need the ARR to do their next raise. So they're constantly looking for annual contracts with clients because that helps them raise. It helps calm their investors that their piece of technology, their solution is gaining traction with the market. But if we just sign one year contract and it fails, then that's not good for you either. So I tend to argue with founders like you think you want a 12-month contract, you actually don't. Let's do a very fast, furious 60-day POC. Let's prove without shadow of a doubt that your platform works in our ecosystem, adds value, and it warrants an enterprise contract. And, because I'll need that to go to leadership to get budget for a large scale deployment, especially at our size. So, yeah, we put a lot of thought into that front end of a POC. And I also try and, I do a lot of mentoring with InsurTech founders, helping to make sure occasionally that means they're not quite ready to do a POC with us. And I try and advise them of it sounds good getting us into an agreement, but if that fails, then your odds of getting back in the door in the next 12, 24 months are pretty slim. So let's make sure you're in the right position as a company before we try and scale this. Because if I get a dozen people internally that say this is not ready for us, then it's a no-go, and it's probably a no-go for the next 12, 24 months, if not forever. So making sure that they're ready, that we're ready. Again, that front end is probably the most critical phase.
Mm. But I think it's interesting as well because it's just a sort of human nature thing that the enthusiasm for POCs goes out the window after a couple of months, from
Oh
internally, because
yeah.
you say, this is probably not enterprise ready. We're not expecting it to be. So this is probably outside of your core day. It's not necessarily going to be super, meaningful and helpful to you. So, that feedback loop diminishes in terms of quality and quantity as well. So, yeah, I'm in total agreement with you. I wanted to ask you about something that you said, which is moderately controversial. Um,
Oh,
not
good.
not from a company perspective, but I recall you saying that we go about InsurTech wrong as an industry, and I wanted to see what you meant by that.
Yeah, I can get myself into trouble, but I'm willing to because here's what I meant by that. I've been obviously as soon as InsurTech became a term, 2015-ish,
Yep.
um, I gravitated towards that as a former founder and as someone
Mm,
again that served the technology industry from a risk standpoint. My my argument then was always, look, we need to focus on delivering the best possible client experience, especially for tech companies, right? They do not understand why our industry is as antiquated as it is. And I know that for having come into the industry on day one and recognizing, oh, we're using legacy technology. I mean, from the 80s and 90s, in most cases, whether you're a broker or a carrier, um, I don't understand why I have to pick up the phone and call someone to get something that should be available in a self-service portal, right? That's an easy example. Um, so I've always been interested in InsurTech. However, I think we've looked at InsurTech to be a series of band-aids for the real problems in our industry, whether, again, you're a carrier, whether you're a broker, um, that core data system that we all live in, whether on the brokerage side, it's a broker management system or agency management system, typically is fairly antiquated in terms of technology and fairly closed off in terms of technology. So things like APIs, a lot of this technology was built before APIs were even technically possible. And InsurTechs come along as point solutions that solve a very particular need. But what you wind up with is a little bit of a Frankenstein workflow system. And I've spent enough time on the operations side working with the service teams, with our sales teams to know it's very painful when a workflow involves 7, 8, 10, 15 platforms to complete it end to end. That's not fair. That's not an efficient system for a service person to conduct their daily life. And they end up working around that technology. So instead of, oh, I have this system that performs this one task really well, they forget that they have access to it, or it's just something else they have to log into, and I'm going to go do it my own way and work around it. So you end up buying a lot of technology that your people are not actually using. You think they are, but 80% of them are still doing the workflow the same way they did 20 years ago. And so I think this problem is really getting a spotlight right now with AI, because as glorious a technology as generative AI is, as transformational as it will be, and I think I'm in the camp of, I think it's actually underhyped, as overhyped as it may seem right now. Long term, I think it's going to be transformational, unlike anything we've ever seen. And yet, without access to the core data, AI doesn't get you very far at all. So these agentic workflows that we're talking about building, where we have agentic AI that's performing tasks in the background 24/7 on behalf of our clients, our associates. If it can't get to the main system of record and update that record and access all of that data, including document management systems, customer-facing data, it's not going to perform the function as well as it could. And so we're now starting to all realize core systems need to be modernized. And even the legacy technology providers of those systems also recognize this, and they are working to fix this. But it's an issue holding the entire industry back. And so I feel like for 10 years, we allowed InsurTechs to be Band-Aids on the real problem, which is that core system that really needed to be modernized to take full advantage of any piece of InsurTech, but absolutely AI.
Yeah, I agree, and it echoes a conversation we had with I had Heather from Clara Analytics on, and she'd done innovation at scale across a few things, and then obviously she's got this, it's a claim-specific solution, but essentially that we were talking about what's holding back the industry, and she completely agreed. It was like flexibility, adaptability, scalability of the core systems and their suitability to plug things in. AI I mean, you've touched on it there, but is there anything more specific to AI that you think we're doing particularly wrong? Is it picking up these kind of point solutions? Is it underestimating it? Yeah, sort of from an insurance industry, where do you think we're specifically going wrong with AI?
Well, I don't think it's for lack of trying. There are some amazing pieces of AI technology that are domain specific for insurance, and I do actually think that's necessary. I don't think the main LLM providers are going to fully bring us what we need, because insurance is so specific. Just look at policy design of a property casualty policy. Things like ChatGPT or Claude, they don't fully read policies in the way that they're meant to be read. which is, an endorsement modifies base language in the policy. I need to remove that language and insert the endorsed language. There's a manuscript endorsement that changes lots of different things. The models have a hard time without being trained in insurance, and we have a number of those solutions, including many that we're working with, but many more that are being built. So I think there is a growing wave of AI companies that are focused on insurance and are delivering really good products. But if you're a carrier and your actuarial tables sit on a mainframe computer somewhere, you could use AI for data ingestion all you want, but you're not actually going to get to full agentic underwriting until you modernize that system where those models live. So I think, again, back to the core systems that we all live in, those are the issues that are holding us back. It's not the investment in AI into insurance, the companies that are focused on it. Look at Y Combinator, 80%. That's a big US accelerator for technology companies in the US. Even BrokerTech Ventures, which has about a dozen companies that go through the cohort each year. This year, about 80% were AI-focused InsurTechs. And so I think that trend will continue. It's just a question of how much can they integrate with your data system, your workflows to actually fully deliver the promise of what AI could mean. Quite honestly, I think you'd have a much better time starting from the ground up and building something completely bespoke for today's environment. You could build a fully agentic AI brokerage much easier than you could reverse engineer and retrofit an existing brokerage. So these are not easy problems to solve, but several of us are willing to go through the pain.
Yeah. No, we had a conversation about fully. Yeah, I mean, because that's all I was thinking as you were talking. I'd had a philosophical conversation about the fully agentic AI native brokerage, and why couldn't you? And some of it is to say that culturally, society wise, even culturally within insurance, are we going to want to do that? But there's always going to be a portion of that business that we are going to want to get rid of, and because some of that business isn't profitable by nature of it as well. So yeah, there's a huge opportunity there. I'm conscious of time actually, and there's two questions I had left, but I feel like I might have to pick. So I'm gonna go pick because we touched on BrokerTech Ventures there. You are obviously part of the investment team as well. I think we're going to have a theme. Are there any specific themes that you're interested in right now? Or is it just AI? If it's got AI in it, we'll look at it at the moment.
No. Sometimes it's the lesser, the least sexy option on the table. AI is very interesting. There's a lot to it. Actually, I'm a little worried. I talk to a lot of VCs who have the same sort of fear in that we're in that .com era with AI, right? Where there will absolutely be winners, but there will be losers as well. There will be a lot of consolidation in that space, and it's very difficult for most brokers, carriers, anyone, investors, to look under the hood of an AI company to really determine, did you build something proprietary or is your company based on someone else's technology, right? The number of startups that I've seen that are simply wrappers around GPT or Claude or a mix of those, I don't think that's a long-term play as a company if you're relying on someone else's technology for your own. That's, it's debatable. But some of the big challenges, remain. Yeah, they've been the same for 20 years, as long as I've been here, just in terms of renewal management, right? Like we're talking to a company that's building some technology around making that process easier for the desk level user to have a full understanding of what their renewal book looks like. I liken this to here in the States. There's a pizza delivery company called Domino's Pizza, and they have a piece of technology it's my favorite example of a good user experience, which is the Domino's Pizza Tracker. And so if you order a pizza, you have an email confirmation, but in that you've got a pizza tracker that in real time will update with Alex is putting toppings on your pizza right now, and Garrett just put your pizza into the oven, and Sophie is now driving to your house, right? So you have full awareness of where your pizza is at all stages. And I feel like for me, companies that are focused on client experience are the most interesting, because that's what it comes down to. You mentioned like, well, AI can do pretty much everything. What it can't do is deliver trust and communicate in a way that humans like. And I think that's actually going to accelerate in the future, where we're more skeptical of AI responses and solutions. I want a human to validate that what the AI has told me is the best situation for me is in fact the best situation for me. I think so. Yeah, again, customer facing, customer experience type InsurTechs are the most interesting and always have been for me.
I completely agree, and particularly on that summary. Well, I mean, I would do vested interest. I keep getting told my job's going to get replaced every 5 minutes, and I'm like going, if you can get to a point where people trust that, not that people necessarily trust people in the recruitment industry, but a certain level of tenure and experience, I'd like to think that they do. Then yes, I agree, and will be surpassed, and the same in certain points of brokerage. But so I think we had a guest on and put it really nicely, and said it was about essentially surgery. We get to the point where technology is so good, and I know this is a different technology, but for example, that it would almost seem negligent not to have a fully automated surgery rather than have a human do it. Then we know we've kind of like crossed the Rubicon, and it's a different world. We're not there yet, and I think that remains to be the case. So yeah, fully agree. Garrett, I could talk to you all day, mainly because you've got so many roles that we could probably cover quite so many. But thank you so much for being a guest. Super interesting. And I hope we get a chance to bump into each other in the real very, very soon.
Yeah, let's do it. Thanks for having me, and we'll do a part 2 sometime soon.
I hope so. Thank you.